Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a little trip back in time to a place where winter was a whole different kind of beast. Picture this, a bitter, icy wind howling through the empty streets of a medieval village, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, and the ground beneath your feet is frozen solid. No heaters, no electric blankets, not even a trusty space heater to rely on. Just you, your woolen clothes, and the eternal cold. Now, you probably won't survive this, at least not without a ton of layers and a good bit of luck. But let's see how medieval European farmers made it through these frozen months without the modern comforts we take for granted. They didn't have central heating, after all, or any of the convenient technologies that make winter bearable today. Their secret? A combination of grit, resourcefulness, and a little bit of stubbornness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Where are you tuning in from tonight, and what's the temperature like? We're all in this cozy, imaginary time machine together, after all. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Winters in medieval Europe were nothing short of a test of endurance. Without any form of modern heating, and with the added complication of harsh weather and snow, life was difficult enough just trying to stay warm. But somehow, farmers, those resilient, hardy souls, managed to survive the worst of it. How? Well, first, let's dive into what made winter so brutal back then. You might be surprised to learn that medieval winters were not only cold, they were unpredictably cold. Europe's climate, especially in northern and central regions, often went through serious cold spells, leading to heavy snow, ice-covered rivers, and freezing temperatures that could last for months. You know that cozy feeling you get when the weather outside is frightful, but your home is so delightful. Well, that wasn't happening for farmers back then. They weren't sitting next to a roaring fire while sipping hot chocolate. Most had a simple hearth fire that barely managed to warm the space around it. And let's not forget, homes were small, often just one or two rooms. And with no insulation, the heat from the hearth couldn't even reach the far corners. This created an environment where the cold seemed to be part of the furniture. So, the first survival tool was adapting to that chill. You'd think they could huddle up and call it a day, but there was more to it than that. Now, let's talk about the most important part of surviving these frozen months: the hearth. But the challenge didn't end there. The problem with this setup was that wood was scarce, and it wasn't as if there was a Home Depot down the street where you could grab a few bundles of firewood. People had to rely on what they could gather, chop, or trade for, and depending on the region, that could mean going without fire for long periods during the colder months. Wool came to the rescue once again, helping farmers stay warm even when their firewood ran out. Let's take a moment to talk about the absolute MVP of medieval winter survival: wool. If you've ever worn a wool sweater on a chilly day, you'll know how warm and snug it feels. But imagine having to rely on it for pretty much everything. Wool wasn't just something medieval farmers wore, it was everything. It wasn't just about clothes, it was about staying alive. The beauty of wool lies in its natural insulating properties. It can trap heat in the fibers while also wicking moisture away from the body. So, even if you were sweating from working in the fields, wool would keep you warm without making you clammy. Wool garments, whether it was thick tunics, cloaks, or hats, were absolutely essential for surviving the cold. And since sheep were common livestock, wool was relatively easy to come by, making it the go-to fabric for farmers. You can imagine that people didn't just have one woolen coat, right? No, no. Layering was key. Woolen undergarments, outer cloaks, scarves, and hats were all essential pieces of gear. Historians still argue about whether wool could ever be fully waterproof, but it certainly had water-resistant qualities. Medieval farmers often wore woolen cloaks that, when well oiled, would shed water as they worked outside. Think about it. If you're trudging through snow or slogging through muddy fields, wool would be your best defense, almost like wearing a blanket that somehow never got wet. And yet, wool had its limits. While it kept you warm, it could only do so much when temperatures dropped to life-threatening levels. Farmers learned to make the best of woolen bedding as well, layering thick blankets of wool to sleep under. But sleeping in a wool blanket didn't guarantee you wouldn't wake up stiff and chilled. Remember, there was no cozy mattress topper, no heated water bottles, and no electric blankets to help you out. What's truly interesting, and a bit quirky, is that medieval people would often stuff their woolen bedding with feathers or straw. Imagine sleeping under a quilt stuffed with hay, nice and fluffy, but not quite what you'd expect in modern comfort. The use of straw or feathers added some extra insulation, but the best way to stay warm was simply staying close to others. People often shared beds, sometimes in communal settings where several families lived in one big space. This wasn't because they were all best friends. It was because the shared body heat was the only thing that kept them from freezing at night. If you've ever been cold and had to snuggle up to a friend or family member just to survive the night, you know the drill. Warmth is best when it's shared. But let's not forget, even with all these woolen layers, life wasn't exactly cozy. For all its insulating power, wool couldn't combat everything. And with no way to seal in warmth properly, farmers still had to face the cold mornings, even if they did wake up with a few extra layers of body heat. Now, while wool worked wonders for warmth, there was still the issue of the cold stone walls.